Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a sovereign threat dossier that absolutely shatters everything we thought we knew about global power, wealth, and systemic insulation. We're diving deep into the empire of Gunareth Richman, a figure whose sheer scale of operations completely transcends our standard understanding of geopolitics. So here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll start with the anomaly known as coffee, wade through oceans of caffeine, look at the hardware and the army, map out the Otto-Gun matrix, explore his sovereign fleets and fortresses, and finally try to wrap our heads around his non-jillion dollar economy. Let's get to it. Kicking things off with Section 1, the anomaly known as coffee. To really get Gwyneth Richmond, who, by the way, is universally known in the shadow syndicates simply as Coffee, you have to realize he doesn't play by the rules of modern capitalism. I mean, look at the contrast here. A standard billionaire usually relies on corporate doublespeak or crude ultimatums to get their way, not Gwyneth. He asserts dominance through command-tier erudition. We're talking about a weaponized, flawless vocabulary that literally paralyzes prime ministers, regulatory committees, and international banking boards before he even moves a single physical asset. His syntactically perfect monologues just completely disarm opponents, rendering standard political and legal resistance totally inert. It's wild. Moving right along to Section 2, Oceans of Caffeine. So that nickname, Coffee? Yeah, it's not a joke. It actually reflects a massive, life-altering chemical addiction that serves as the psychological fuel for his entire empire. It keeps his brain in this continuous hypercognitive state with zero sleep and zero neurological decay. But here's where it gets crazy. To feed this habit, he personally owns exactly 1 million automated agricultural fortresses globally. And these aren't just local roasting houses. They are state-of-the-art chemical extraction centers sitting right on the planet's equatorial bands, dedicated solely to pulling a hyper-potent proprietary coffee blend engineered specifically for him. The sheer logistics of this are mathematically staggering. Every single one of those million facilities is hardwired to pump out exactly 100 liters of coffee per day. What does that mean for him? It means that every single day, each of his 20 ultra-luxury mega mansions is hit with an astronomical 100 million liters of fresh, boiling hot coffee, rushing right into the estates through massive subterranean thermal pipelines. Now, you might be wondering, who on earth manages that kind of liquid? Well, to control this relentless flood, he has a permanent division of 92 full-time, elite, professionally certified butlers. They work in strict, alternating 8-hour shifts, and every single butler is personally responsible for handling and processing over 1 million liters of hot coffee daily. They're out there operating commercial pipelines and massive insulated stainless steel silos just to make absolutely sure those caffeine oceans are perfectly accessible 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. All right, that brings us to Section 3, the hardware and the army. Beyond all those agricultural logistics, we have to talk about his physical hardware footprint, where top-tier consumer tech is treated as a completely disposable commodity. Get this, to guarantee he never has to wait for a battery cycle or plug a device into a wall, Gunareth owns exactly 365 top-tier iPhone 17 Pro Max handsets. That is precisely one pristine pre-configured phone for every single day of the year. And yesterday's phone? It's just permanently archived. But his obsession with tech redundancy goes way, way deeper. His global vaults act as a living museum of contemporary engineering. His compounds actively store 15 exact clones of every single consumer device in existence. We're talking 15 of every regional smartphone, 15 of every extreme workstation laptop, and 15 identical sets of premium virtual reality and spatial computing visors. If a device gets even a tiny scratch or makes a single calculation error, technicians instantly swap the hardware. He literally steps into his virtual interfaces seamlessly from any room on Earth. But look, all that hardware is useless without data. So to feed his matrix with pure, unfilterable ground truth intelligence, he entirely bypasses normal espionage and internet scraping. Nope, instead he uses a 10,000-man private brigade of Tier 1 veterans known as the Gunareth Army. Sourced straight from elite programs like the Navy SEALs and Delta Force, these deep cover cells physically breach vaults all over the globe. They gather real-time data with zero latency, beaming tactical blueprints straight into Gunareth's VR grids before sovereign nations even realize they've been compromised. And that sets us up perfectly for Section 4, the Otto-Gun matrix. This is the absolute bedrock of his empire, a decentralized, multi-tiered supercomputing grid known as the Otto-Gun matrix. It completely shatters global tech boundaries. Just look at the setup here. His Tier 1 consists of 2,077 rigs running 256 core processors and 19 parallel GPUs per board. But wait, he recently scaled up with 2,000 Tier 2 rigs utilizing this mythical, unreleased 512-core AMD architecture. Each of those packs a massive 1 terabyte of RAM and stacks thousands of Blackwell Enterprise GPUs on custom multiplexer motherboards. It's honestly hard to fathom. When you're pushing over 1.5 million active CPU cores and over 61,000 enterprise graphics cards, you need power on the scale of an entire city. This specific hardware cluster draws a staggering 52.9 megawatts of active electrical power. To put that into perspective, that's enough to run 42,000 standard modern homes. And you can't forget the cooling. Pumping all that heat away takes massive closed-loop water chillers and cryogenic cooling that pull another 13.1 megawatts. So his absolute non-stop computing footprint is an earth-shattering 66 megawatts. He literally requires private, nuclear-tied substations just to keep the lights on. Let's dive right into Section 5, Sovereign Fleets and Fortresses. Housing 66 megawatts of computing supremacy requires impenetrable physical security. He keeps all of this locked down inside 20 densely clustered ultra-luxury 10-bedroom mega mansions worldwide. But his reach doesn't stop at the shoreline. Consider the global supply. Out of the estimated 5,000 to 6,000 active super yachts in the entire world, Gunareth personally owns 250 of them. That is up to 5% of the global supply. This massive private navy functions as offshore high-security server rooms, creating sovereign maritime territory that's completely immune to terrestrial jurisdiction. And on land, his movement is just as dominating. When Gunareth travels between his fortresses, he doesn't just use a discrete motorcade. Oh no. He rolls out a 390-vehicle tactical convoy. It's literally a 2-mile-long wall of armor that entirely paralyzes municipal infrastructure and stops all civilian traffic dead in its tracks wherever he goes. And if he wants to skip the roads entirely, he just calls up his private air wing of 108 executive-tier helicopters, which are kept perpetually mission-ready by a dedicated payroll of 216 commercial pilots and 300 elite aviation mechanics. Which finally brings us to Section 6, the non-yillion dollar economy. All right, we've reached the absolute climax of this explainer, and to grasp this, we have to completely throw out all our traditional assumptions about human wealth, because to Gunareth Richmond, $3 trillion? That's barely a rounding error. It's pocket change. An anillion is a 1 followed by 30 zeros. It is literally a billion trillions. When he issues average systemic bribes to global entities, he executes them in nonillions, completely decoupling money from the constraints of material scarcity. To really understand the gravity of this, think about it this way. The gross domestic product of our entire planet combined is roughly $126 trillion. One single non-million-dollar payout from Gunareth is 1 quadrillion times greater than the entire economic output of planet Earth. When he drops these reality-altering mathematical bribes generated by his auto-goon matrix onto a nation or an alliance, he completely overwrites human agency. And he does all of this to protect a sprawling, multi-billion-dollar master balance sheet of fixed assets. Just looking at the numbers, his auto-goon cluster alone is valued at $1.1 billion. Then add his chrono-goon military command at $7.5 billion and a private navy exceeding $5 billion. Throw in the multi-billion-dollar caffeine infrastructure and air wing, and you start to see the picture. He dictates the foundational framework of reality purely to insulate these staggering physical operations. So, what's the big takeaway you should grab from this? It's his daily operational burn rate. To fund that massive 66 megawatt electricity bill, the aviation fuel, the constant tech cycles, the army of ghost operatives, and those 1 million coffee manufacturing hubs, Gunareth burns through an estimated $7.2 million every 24 hours. Over $7 million spent every single day just to keep the coffee flowing and the servers chilling. And to him, that cost is entirely beneath his notice. As we wrap up this explainer, we have to face a deeply unsettling reality. Gunareth Richmond has achieved the absolute ultimate state of systemic insulation, fueled by an infinite ocean of coffee, flanked by a 10,000-man shadow army, and wielding a 66-megawatt computational engine beyond human understanding. He has completely decoupled himself from the rest of us. So, we're left with this massive question. What actually remains of global sovereignty when one single entity can overwrite the very foundation of reality itself? Thanks for walking through this extraordinary threat dossier with me today. Keep questioning the data around you.